point, also panic will soften. It will tend to soften. You won't be living in panic. Your decisions will become lighter. You won't be beating yourself or having headache to make decisions because everything will be clear and you'll know what to prioritize at what point and what not to prioritize. And you will stop reacting to every opportunity. You'll come to realize that not every opportunity that comes along your way is meant to be exploited once you have everything clear. And that is what a strategy gives you. You'll begin evaluating opportunities based on alignment. That is what strategy will give you. And in my short professional journey, I've met professionals who are, of course, extremely hardworking. They were attending courses, taking roles at their places of work, also accepting responsibilities as they came along their way. But when you stop and ask them, where is this all heading to? Of course, they took a pause, not because they lacked ambition. That is not the case. It's not because they had never translated intention into long-term direction. That also is not the case. And of course, we understand that without direction, even progress can feel unstable. At this point, I hope that you've begun understanding that. And so once they defined, after they took a pause and defined a 5-year trajectory, not necessarily a rigid plan, because you can plan, but life will give you curveballs and you need to be very flexible with your plan. So having a 5-year trajectory or a strategic plan is not a rigid plan. It's just a direction, something to guide and order you or order your steps. And so when they did that, something changed. They didn't just move faster. They moved calmer because there was calm restored in their life. There was no comparison. They knew they were on schedule because they knew they were heading towards a certain direction. And so when you avoid long-term thinking, it doesn't protect you from uncertainty. And of course, that is what a majority of us do. We say, let me just live a day at a time. I want to plan for 10 years because I want to protect myself from disappointment. But that is not the case. Avoiding long-term thinking doesn't protect you from uncertainty. It often increases your anxiety because things will just be happening. You don't have any specific direction you're following, and that increases your anxiety. It's not good to operate from the place of anxiety. So strategy is not about control. That is an important thing that you need to know. It is about reducing unnecessary mental noise. It's about cutting off things that, of course, they are not illegal to do, they are not bad to do, but they're not adding to your course in any way. So you sift them out and channel your energy to areas where growth will be impactful or growth will be realized in higher amounts or quantities, if you may put it that way. So that is just mapping out why we need to have a conversation around today's session. And I hope that that gives you sufficient buy-in even as we progress. I hope you're learning something. Please let me know in the comment section when you pick something that is really beneficial. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you're learning. So allow me move to the next slide. And the next slide, we are looking at what we call the arc. We are looking at the arc. That is the next slide. And we're talking about awareness, intention, and strategy. What we refer to as the arc. We are talking about awareness, intention, and strategy. And so before even we move deeper into strategic planning, which forms the core of our discussion tonight, I want us to zoom out and see the larger structure of what we've been building. And this program is not a collection of disconnected sessions. As I mentioned before, every session is like layer upon layer. We are building line upon line, layer upon layer. In week 1 was about awareness. We delved deeper into awareness. That was in week 1. And we slowed down based on the assignments that we did. We named patterns. Also, we stopped trying to fix everything. That is on week 1. And we learned to see clearly. That was still in week 1. And that was because without awareness, you drift, as we had seen in week 1. Without awareness, you move, but you move without orientation. And then we moved to week 2, where we introduced intention. That was in week 2. And we moved from now pressure to conscious choice. That was in week 2. We moved from pressure to conscious choice. And we began asking ourselves, what deserves my energy? We began asking ourselves, what season am I actually in? We began asking ourselves, what am I carrying that no longer fits in the current version of me? So we did that because awareness alone is not enough. After we moved from chaos, we gained clarity. Now we moved to awareness, and we realize awareness alone is not enough. You can see clearly, but still you will react automatically. And intention, it allowed you to begin choosing deliberately. That's what we did with week 1 and week 2. And now we are moving to week 3, where we build strategy. So they are interconnected. We move from awareness to intention to strategy. That's why it's important not to miss any of the session. Or if you miss for whatever reason, make time to catch up before we move to the next session, because we build up on each, the sessions build up on each other. And here's why week 3 matters, why building with strategy matters. Because even when you are intentional, without having a strategy, you'll often experience quiet instability. You may not take note of that instantaneously, but there'll always be quiet instability. That is, if you are aware, you are intentional, but you don't have strategy. So you will know what matters in your life, and you will know what deserves your energy. But you will not yet have long-term structure to channel that particular energy or priorities. So, and without structure, anxiety is likely to set in or creep back in your life. And you'll start wondering if you're moving fast enough. You remember those questions we asked ourselves in first and second session. You'll begin wondering if you're left behind. You'll begin wondering if you chose wrongly or if you're wasting time. All of those questions will begin coming in if there is no strategy or there is no structure given to your energy, your priority, your intentionality, your awareness. If there is no structure in form of a strategy, then anxiety will creep in, and symptoms of anxiety are those questions that I've posed to you. You begin wondering if you're moving fast enough, or you begin wondering if you're being left behind by your peers, or you begin wondering if you chose wrongly. It could be a career path that you chose, but since you don't have a strategy, or a 5 year strategy, life strategy, or career strategy, you begin wondering, did I make a wrong choice? Or it could be even the choice of, it could be even a choice of work that you did. It could be a choice of investment that you did. But since you didn't have a 5 year strategic life plan, then you begin questioning your choices. So strategy will answer those fears. If you have strategy, it will answer those fears. And it will not be by guaranteeing you the outcomes of whatever thing that you're choosing to pursue, but it will create orientation. And I want you to think of it this way. Awareness, it will clear the fog in your eyes and your mind. That is what awareness will do, what we did in first week. And then intention, it will help you to choose the direction that you want to move to. And then strategy, it will help you draw the road that you need to follow. So if you're keen enough, these three, they're interconnected. So each layer will build on the previous one, as I've mentioned, and it is not quite, you'll not be doing yourself justice if you miss a session and you don't follow through by listening to the recording. And that's why we didn't start with the 5 year plan in week 1. Maybe some will have expected maybe week 1 we begin a 5 year strategy, because we needed to lay some foundation and do some preliminary work before now we come to the 5 year strategy. So planning without awareness will create fantasy, and we have many people who live in that particular level where they are planning without being aware. It will create fantasy, but planning without intention, it will create pressure. So where you want to is to plan after awareness and intention, and that creates calmness, which everybody wants in their life. Of course, if you look around you, you'll see professionals who jump straight into long-term planning without first understanding their patterns or pressure sources. Because people are making long-term plans, they are always on the move to jump into the next group that is making plans for their lives and all that. And that's why we have self-development or personal development courses out there. People keep on enrolling for these courses and all that. But if you pause and ask them, where is this heading to? They may not necessarily give you an accurate answer, because they had a motivational speaker telling them you need to be investing in a personal development course at least once every year. So they chose to begin investing in January when they made the new year resolutions. But unfortunately, many of them are investing in activities without having direction. So activities without direction, you don't necessarily become productive because there is no progress you'll make. You'll only be doing movement with no specific progress. So such professionals will create impressive plans about their lives. They'll detail timelines, clear milestones, and all that. But months later down the line, they'll feel misaligned again. And the reason why they feel misaligned is because the plan wasn't layered on clarity, it was layered on urgency. They needed to tick a box, layered on urgency. And what we are doing here is different. And I hope that you get it. We are building from the inside out. We want to be building from the out inside. It's from the inside out. Understanding who you are, becoming intentional, and then having a strategy as you move forward. It's important to note that most anxiety about future is not caused necessarily by uncertainty. Most anxiety about the future is not necessarily caused by uncertainty. It is caused mainly by a lack of internal structure. That is anxiety about the future. And once structure is present, even flexible structure, you don't necessarily need to have a rigid, perfect laid out structure. Just structure being present to offer you direction, even flexible structure, the mind will relax because it will understand that I'm working with a certain blueprint, I'm working with a certain map to guide me to this particular destination. You will no longer be floating if you have a structure. You'll be oriented, and that's what you need. You'll be oriented. And as we conclude on this slide, it is important to note that growth is not necessarily built in one leap. It is layered deliberately. That is growth. It is layered deliberately. Is layered deliberately. Are you learning something? Please drop a comment in the comment section. Feel free to do that. I want, as you drop the comment, I want us to shift gears and look at why most people avoid long-term thinking. And you could be on this call, and maybe for the longest you've been avoiding long-term thinking. I want you to pay attention to the next slide. Why most people avoid long-term thinking, and this is something honest that I need us to address before we move to the next set of slides. And you could be one of the professionals who tend to avoid long-term thinking, or someone who likes avoiding long-term thinking. And it may not necessarily be because they are lazy, or it may not necessarily be because they lack ambition. Far from it. They could be among those who have the highest level of ambition, or even most hardworking. But for whatever reason, they tend to avoid long-term thinking. And the reason could be that long-term thinking, it feels risky. Maybe at one point they tried planning for long-term and then things didn't turn out completely as they'd planned and they were disappointed. And that, of course, felt a bit risky and they tend to shy away from long-term thinking or planning. When you think 5 years ahead, something happens psychologically. And this also happened to me when I did a 5-year plan. When you think 5 years ahead, something happens psychologically. You are forced to confront the following. You'll confront the possibility of choosing wrong because you'll realize I don't have luxury of time. There are specific things that I need to have to have attained by the time 5 years elapse. So you will confront the possibility of choosing wrong. The reality that time is limited will also become real to you. The discomfort of committing, you will have to commit. And the fear of missing alternative paths also will need to confront that. And for high achieving individuals, especially like you and me, who are in competitive professional environments, and of course, maybe if you're in healthcare space, maybe competition began way back while in school. The idea of committing can feel a bit threatening if you're in that particular cadre of people. And because commitment will mean there are trade-offs that you will need to make, because you realize I have a limitation in terms of attention, time, and energy. And when I'm committing, I need to give the best to the things that I've committed to. Then there are things that may not necessarily be bad that you're doing. There could be good things you're doing. But because of that limitation of time, energy, and attention, you will have to shelve them and give priority to those that matter in the 5-year strategic plan that you have. So, and trade-offs, of course, because commitment means trade-off. That is one of the things that they feel threatened about. And trade-offs will mean letting go of infinite options that they could be having. So instead of thinking long-term, many people default to short-term movement. And when they do that, they focus on the next exam that they're about to do. They focus on the next posting or the next role that is within their reach or the next visible opportunity. And of course, movement may feel productive, but the subtle problem with that is that when you only think in short increments, you become overly sensitive to comparison. That is, when you only think in short increments, you become overly sensitive to comparison. You begin comparing yourself to your colleague at work. You begin comparing yourself to your brothers, your sisters, your friends. How are they moving? That is when you're doing short increments. But when you have a long-term plan, it won't bother you who is moving faster than you, because you're on course with your plan. You'll keep on implementing. So every peer's milestones will feel urgent. That is, if you're operating with short increments, every opportunity will feel like a race, and every delay will feel like falling behind, which may not necessarily be the case. And without realizing it, anxiety will increase, and not because you lack ability. It's because direction will remain undefined. And as long as direction remains undefined, anxiety will be resident in your life. So avoiding long-term thinking can feel safe in the moment. And of course, it may protect you from commitment, but it doesn't protect you from drift. Remember, drift is one of the things we covered before, in one of the sessions that has passed. And drift quietly will increase your stress levels. And this is mainly because deep down, your mind craves for orientation, and your mind wants to know where anything that you're doing is heading to. So strategy is not about removing uncertainty. It is about reducing unnecessary instability. That is strategy. That is strategy. I remember at one point I spoke to a professional who said, or who mentioned that I don't want to think 5 years ahead. Everything changes anyway. That was their mindset. I don't want to think 5 years ahead. Everything changes anyway. But when I asked where their current path was heading towards or leading towards, they couldn't answer me, that professional who gave me that response. And of course, that lack of orientation was what actually caused their stress, because they felt perpetually under stress. So once they sat down and defined a direction of where they were heading to, their anxiety reduced remarkably. That's once they defined where they were heading to, the anxiety reduced remarkably. And of course, the lesson that I picked from that is that nothing in the external life changed immediately, but internally something stabilized. And that is what gave them orientation and also eliminated some of the things that they were passing through because of lack of direction. Okay. So even as we proceed, I hope that you're learning something, and I want us to look at what is strategy, or what strategy is and what strategy isn't, as the next set of slides. What strategy is and what it isn't. And of course, now that you've named why people avoid, or we've named why people avoid long-term thinking, we need to come clearly, we need to define clearly what strategy, to redefine clearly what strategy is and what it is not, because the word strategy, when mentioned, it often creates tension. I don't know about you, but whenever it's mentioned, if you don't have a clear understanding about it, it often creates tension. Some people will hear strategy and immediately think a rigid 5-year plan that must come to pass, whether it rains or it shines, or even fixed career ladders. Thinking that once we have a 5-year strategy, I've locked myself in this career path, or even the exact titles by certain ages, or locked in commitments. And that, of course, is a misunderstanding. And that is a misunderstanding, and it's what makes long-term thinking feel a bit restrictive. And so it's important to have clarity on that. And by way of beginning to understand strategy, it's important to mention that it is not prediction. It's not gambling. You're not predicting the future. A strategy does not predict the future. That has to be ingrained in your mind, that it does not predict the future. You can predict the future. You can market, you can predict the future. You can predict market change. You can predict opportunities shift. You can predict life evolving. You can predict you evolving. You can be able. That is strategy to be able to help you do that. Okay, because the future is not predictable. You cannot predict the future, but with strategy, you can make changes in your life. With strategy, you can shift opportunities that come along your way to a direction that you will want them to benefit you the most. And so, strategy is not about uncertainty. It's not about being certain of certain things in your life. That is not strategy. It is about orientation. Think of it this way. If you are driving and maybe you are in a car and you are driving, you left your home, you are driving, but you are driving without a destination in mind. Every turn that we'll make, of course, every turn that we'll make will feel random because there is no specific direction that we are going towards. Every turn will feel random. And if you know the direction, even if the route adjusts, you move with coherence, knowing that my end destination is this place. And you've seen that in town, whether you're driving or using a matatu. And maybe if you're using a matatu and traffic, there's a traffic snarl up along the main route that the matatu uses, they'll find detours or panya routes that they'll follow, but still get the same destination faster, even because they're trying to avoid the traffic. If you're driving your own car, maybe you look at the Google map, you notice this route that I'm intending to follow, it has traffic snarl up. You use a different route, but heading to a specific destination. So every turn you'll be making, it will be intentional and to be with coherence. So strategy is not about mapping every step that you need to take. It is about defining the kind of professional you are becoming. That's a question that you need to ask yourself time and again. What kind of professional am I becoming? What kind of work would I want to be known for? What kind of life am I designing in everything I'm doing? What trade-offs am I willing to accept to get where I am? And strategy, it will help you to define those. So trade-offs are central to strategy. Trade-offs. You remember one of the things that we looked at when you're talking about time as a limitation, energy as a limitation, and attention as a limitation. One of the ways of navigating that was about trade-offs. There are things that will be good for you to do, but you'll have to give them up because you're trading them off for something more important that adds to the direction of your life or to the strategy that you're operating with currently. So trade-offs are central to strategy. That is very, very key. And without trade-offs, you will not have any strategy. Okay? You will not have any strategy. You'll only have aspirations. That is without trade-offs. You'll only have aspirations. When you say I want to become this kind of professional, you've defined that. You are also quietly saying, I'm not prioritizing certain other facts. Remember in one of the sessions I defined what we call opportunity cost, the foregone value, the best foregone value, that is opportunity cost. So once you know what to prioritize, of course, there are things that you also know you are not supposed to prioritize. And that narrowing down will create clarity in your life, and clarity will create calmness. And strategy does not eliminate flexibility. Please have that in mind. When you have a strategy, it does not necessarily mean you're eliminating flexibility. In fact, a good strategy will allow you to have flexibility. It will have wiggle room. That's a good strategy. And because when direction is clear, you can adjust the route without losing orientation because you have a specific destination in mind. In 5 years' time, I need to be earning this amount of money. In 5 years' time, I need to be having this master. So along the way, things may change, but your destination still remains. So you'll use a different route to get to your destination. That's what I mean by flexibility. See, our time is moving really fast. So allow me shift gears. Look at what we mean or comparison between trajectory and a rigid plan. What are the differences? What is the difference between trajectory compared to a rigid plan? Now, on this slide, I'm going to address one of the most important mindset shifts that you need to have, especially in coming up with your strategic life plan or in strategic life planning. One of the most important mindset shifts that you'll need to have. So people, more often than not, they resist long-term thinking because they confuse trajectory with rigidity. A rigid plan would sound like this, which will be characterized by the following phrases. That is a rigid plan. Be characterized by a phrase such as, by this age, I must achieve this. Another phrase that characterizes a rigid plan is, if I am not there by this time, I'm behind. Another phrase is, if I change direction, I've wasted time. But of course, rigid plans will create anxiety because uh, you will treat life, if you have a rigid plan, you will treat life as linear and predictable, which is the opposite. Life is not linear, neither is it predictable. Life is very unpredictable and is not linear. And of course, it rarely unfolds in such a manner or in a linear manner. Life rarely unfolds that way because health will change along the way. Your health may change, markets may shift, and sometimes you may be rendered at the place of work redundant. Your position may be rendered redundant. Opportunities may show up unexpectedly. Opportunities may just show up unexpectedly. Interests may evolve over time. Your interests may evolve over time, and priorities also tend to mature. So that makes life quite unpredictable. It's not moving in a linear motion. That is life. So when your plan is rigid or you make it to be rigid, any deviation from your plan will feel like failure. But when a trajectory is different, or trajectory is different in this case, it is not a timeline. When you're having a trajectory, when you're having a 5 year strategic plan, it's not a timeline that you're setting. It is a direction arc that you are putting in place. And it will sound like this. It will be characterized by the following phrases. I am moving toward becoming a clinician with strategic influence. And it could be I'm moving towards becoming a consultant in whichever space with strategic influence. Or I'm moving towards becoming this and this professional with strategic influence. I am building credibility in systems thinking. That could be another one. Or I am positioning myself in leadership oriented spaces. That could be another characteristic of trajectory. So I want you to notice the difference when you're going through this. I want you to notice the difference that a trajectory, it focuses on identity and direction. That is trajectory. And on the other side, a rigid plan will focus on mixed milestones. That's a rigid plan. It will focus on mixed milestones. So rigid plans will create panic when reality shifts. And trajectory, on the other hand, it will create stability because the orientation will remain intact even when circumstances change. And what we mean by that simply is once you've set your end goal or destination, let's say I'm moving from here to Mombasa, and maybe when I'm setting that goal, my pockets are not that full. So I can't afford a plane ticket. So when I'm setting up or planning for my journey, I plan using bus transport where I can pay 1,500 or 2,000 shillings from Nairobi to Mombasa. But 2 months down the line, I have a windfall, an unexpected windfall, and I have now money that can make me afford a plane ticket. So I'll change my means of transport from using a bus to using a plane. But the destination is still the same, only that the means to get there has changed. That is a trajectory. It's not a rigid plan. But a rigid plan will have sounded something like this. I plan because I don't have sufficient money. I plan to use a bus, but I have 2 months on the line. I have money. I can afford a plane ticket, but I don't want to spend because already I had a plan of using a bus. That seems like a rigid plan. Okay. Now to think of it like this: if you are flying from one country to another, the plane constantly adjusts course due to wind, weather, or turbulence, but the destination remains defined. That is trajectory. Simply another way of explaining trajectory. Okay. So when you're having a trajectory, you may not necessarily need to know every step of what you need to do. But you may need to know your general direction. That is important. You may not necessarily need to know every step, but you may need to know your general direction. And once that direction is clear, your decisions will become easier. Once it's clear, your decisions will become easier because you'll begin asking, does this move me towards my trajectory or away from it? That question will simplify complexities. So that is the difference between trajectory and rigidity, the difference between trajectory and rigidity. And that will now usher us to look at the cost of no strategy. What price will you be paying if you don't operate with any strategy? What price will you be paying? That's what I want us to look at next. Please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. I'll very much glad, be willing to read them out, or questions if you have. Are you picking something? Drop a comment there if you're learning something. I'll be very much glad to know that. Thank you so much. All right, so we look at the cost of not having a strategy. What is the cost of not having a life strategy? What is the cost of not having a life strategy? Because there's always a cost. There's always a cost. So this, of course, is after clarifying what strategy is and what it isn't. And so we need to look at what happens when you don't define any direction at all. You've decided, I'll just live life a day at a time. I'm not planning anything. I'm not planning anything. Of course, in fact, it can feel very productive because you are busy. If you're not defining anything, you'll be very busy. You'll be learning and you'll be accepting opportunities. You are building experience and all that. You're always busy. But something subtle will happen when long term direction remains undefined in your life. Comparison will keep on increasing. And because without your own trajectory, you measure yourself against everyone else. You begin looking at your peers. What moves are they making? Which cars are they driving? Which neighborhood are they staying? And that comparison says it, not understanding that there is a life strategic plan that you need to be working with that will guide you on milestones that you need to meet at certain times in your life. So you feel when you go on LinkedIn and you see your classmates publishing, they've gotten this role, this promotion, you'll feel that you are being left behind. And there's that LinkedIn pressure. When you see them getting promoted, you'll feel that you're delaying, or someone specializes, they've gone back for masters. You'll begin feeling uncertain. Really, do I really know what I need to pursue? People are going for masters. Am I being left behind? Should I just go and do a masters in public health kushikilia? Nikingoja kunaopata clarity to go for a specific course, or what should I do? And it's not that they are ahead. It's not that the rest are ahead of you. It's that you haven't defined what ahead means for you. A very, very important point to note. It's not that the rest are ahead of you, but it is that you haven't defined what ahead means for you. So next, opportunities begin to feel overwhelming when you see them coming. And without orientation, every opportunity will looks potentially important. So you won't know what to prioritize really. You'll be taking everything, ending up overcommitting yourself, burnout setting in, frustrations, anxiety, and all that. And because you're not capable, you consider them all. That is when opportunities come along your way. But evaluating every option that comes along your way from scratch is mentally exhausting at that point when you don't have strategy. Then decision fatigue will increase. You'll feel, I don't need to make decisions already. I'm overwhelmed. And you'll find yourself thinking, should I take this opportunity or leave it? Or is this the right move to make? You're always double gazing yourself. Am I missing something? What if this closes a better door? You'll keep on having those thoughts. And that is because you don't have strategy. It will make even small decisions feel disproportionately very heavy. And perhaps most importantly, progress will feel very unstable. You'll feel very, very unstable because you might be advancing, you might be succeeding, but internally you don't feel anchored. Internally, you won't feel anchored because you're moving but not oriented. Remember, motion and progress are two different things. Motion without direction is just being busy and full of activity, but motion with direction leads to progress. It's very, very important to note that. Okay. And of course, when you're moving without direction, your anxiety will increase over time. And strategy, when you have strategy, it won't remove the uncertainty. What it reduces is instability. And that internal stability is what will allow you, or it will allow you to be patient with yourself. And when direction is clear, you can watch others move without panic. People will be making moves, but you're not panicking because your direction is very clear on what you need to do at any given point. And you can decline opportunities without fearing if at all you're passing potentially or you're closing doors that may never open because your direction is very clear. You can build depth without feeling really urgent. And that is the power of defining your trajectory. I hope I've convinced you enough that you need a trajectory. I hope I've convinced you enough. And so we begin looking at where to begin when you want to start the process of coming up with a strategic life plan. Where do you begin? Where do you begin? And we begin by starting with identity. We begin by starting with identity. And there are questions there that we'll need to ask yourselves. Uh, Many people, when they're beginning to plan, they begin by asking the wrong questions. And the wrong questions sound like this: what title do I want? What institution do I want to work in? What milestone should I reach? What income should I earn? Of course, those are some of the wrong questions that we keep on asking ourselves. But of course, they are not bad questions, only that they could be practical, but they are secondary. They are primary questions that we need to begin with before we ask ourselves, what income should I earn? What title do I want? Those are secondary questions. They're important, yes, but if you're beginning with them, then you are beginning with the wrong questions. They are secondary questions that you ask on top of having answered certain primary and fundamental questions. So if you build strategy on external outcomes alone, which these questions seek to answer, you risk chasing achievements that do not align with who you truly are if you define your strategy based on externalities. So instead, you should begin with identity. Begin with identity. Start with the identity. Who are you becoming? That's an important question to answer. Not who are you proving yourself to be, not who others expect you to become. Those are not questions that you should answer when you're beginning to draft your strategic plan. Not who seems impressive in your field, but who are you genuinely growing into as you build that strategy? Who are you genuinely growing into? Because identity will create coherence, and when identity is clear, your decisions will align naturally. You won't struggle to make decisions. Trade offs will feel less threatening because you won't have to fuss over trade offs. Comparison will reduce drastically, and also energy will become very much focused. And when identity is unclear, now the opposite happens. You chase titles hoping they will define you. You collect achievements hoping they will stabilize you. And also maybe you say yes to opportunities hoping they will give you clarity. You've seen people who do that. They keep on saying yes, yes, hoping that one day I land on something that really resonates with who I am. It doesn't happen that way. That's what we call a rat race. You keep on chasing without getting it. So, but clarity rarely comes from accumulation, of course, and it comes from alignment. When you are aligned, clarity settles in. And I want to say something really carefully, that achievement without identity, it feels unstable. Achievement without identity feels unstable. You've achieved so much, but you don't have an identity. It will feel unstable. You may reach a milestone and still feel very unsettled. You may gain recognition in whichever space you are in, whichever field, whichever study, or whichever course you're doing, and you still feel unsure about it. You've seen people who have achieved so much, but they're not quite sure about it. But when achievement aligns with your identity, something different will happen. And that is that you will feel integrated, you will feel grounded, you will feel sustainable. That is the success or you get or the achievement you get. It will feel sustainable, it will feel grounded, and it will feel integrated. So strategy that is anchored in identity, it will ask the following questions. If your strategy is anchored in identity, it will be anchored or is anchored in identity, it will ask the following questions. What kind of professional do I want to be known as? What kind of professional do I want to be known as? What values do I want my work to reflect? What values do I want my work to reflect? What kind of problems do I care about solving? What kind of problems do I care about solving? What kind of influence feels authentic to me? What kind of influence feels authentic to me? Those are the kind of questions that a strategy that is anchored in identity would ask. And these questions will create depth, and depth will create stability in your life. And depth will create stability in your life. Of course, I've seen professionals who reach highly respected positions in the corporate world. And when they get there, only to quietly feel disconnected from their work, we'll hear them say, there's something I just feel is missing. I'm not settled. And when you exploit, the issue is not just about competence. They are highly competent in what they do. The issue that you'll be able to establish when you narrow down deep into it is that their identity is misaligned. They build strategy around opportunity and not around who they are becoming. They build strategy around opportunity and not around who they were becoming. And so once they recentered around identity, they took time and recentered around identity, their decisions became more calmer and they stopped chasing visibility. They started building coherence. Okay? And of course, as a human being, it's expected that we'll crave for congruence. We'll always crave for congruence. And when identity and action align, your internal tension will reduce drastically. And when identity and action conflict, even your success will feel very, very heavy. It won't be satisfactory. You won't feel satisfaction, or you won't draw satisfaction from your success. Now, I want us to shift gears and look at professional identity clarity, which is very, very important. Professional identity clarity. And by this, we mean we're beginning to translate identity to something more concrete. We're beginning to translate identity to something more concrete. And this is because identity, if left abstract, it can feel very inspiring, but very vague at the same time. It will feel very inspiring, but very vague. If you leave identity up in an abstract state. So let's make it very specific. And this is how we do it. So I want you to answer the following questions. In 5 years, what do you want to be known for? I want you to take a pause and look. In 5 years, what do you want to be known for? You will have maybe your piece of paper and you'll jot it down. In 5 years, what do you want to be known for professionally? Are you a clinician? In 5 years' time, what will you be want to be known for? When your name is mentioned in a certain quarter, what comes in the mind of people? It's not what title you want, it's not what salary you want, it's not what institution you want to be in. Far from it, but what are the qualities? What are the strengths and areas of value that you want associated with your name. Once your name is mentioned, what are the qualities, what are the strengths, and what are those areas of value that you want associated with your name? This is about positioning. Whether you realize it or not, you are already building a reputation. It's very, very important. And every project you take, every skill you deepen, every type of problem you choose to solve, every environment you operate in, already they're working to build a brand, and that brand is tied to your name. So over time, patterns will form, and people will begin to associate you with something. If you never define that identity intentionally, please note that if you never define that identity intentionally, the environment that you operate in will define it by default for you. So you may become known as a reliable but invisible person at the place of work, hardworking but unfocused. You may be known as available for everything, but known for nothing specific. And of course, these identities will determine which opportunities come to you. So none of those are inherently bad by themselves, but they may not align with who you actually want to become. In your mind, you may want to become something different, but people already have defined it for you because you failed to define it intentionally and pursue that. So professional identity clarity asks the following questions. Professional identity clarity asks the following questions. Do I want to be known for depth or breadth? Do I want to be known for technical expertise or systems thinking? Do I want to be known for execution or leadership? Do I want to be known for stability or innovation? Okay. So these distinctions will shape your 5-year direction more than any job title. They'll shape your 5-year direction more than any job title that you'll ever get because titles keep on changing. I don't remember how many titles I've had since I left school, just less than 5 years or 5 years ago. But I've had many titles in between. I lost keeping count. But reputation compounds over time. Reputation compounds over time. And when reputation compounds intentionally, opportunities will begin aligning naturally because your intentions are compounding intentionally. Opportunities that come along your way, they'll begin aligning naturally. And only opportunities that align with the intentions that you've set out from the word go will begin coming along your way. It makes your choices very easy. So you will not be chasing everything and you will begin to attract what fits your identity because you've taken time to intentionally build your professional identity. Is everything clear up until there?
Yes.
Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section or your feedback. I'll really, really appreciate. So this slide ushers us to the next set of slides, and that is on character and lifestyle alignment. Character and lifestyle alignment. Character and lifestyle alignment. I see our time is moving really fast. We've got 30 minutes to go. I'll try to keep time today. So we're on course. We're on course. So character and lifestyle alignment is our next set of slides. And under this, I want us to look, of course, we've begun already talking about the strategic life plan or strategic planning of your life. And of course, when we look at how many professionals plan their lives, they narrow down or they narrow their focus entirely to career. And they narrow their life entirely to career. And they'll begin looking at titles. They'll begin looking at institutions where they work and having a badge of pride on that. Promotions, they'll begin looking at specialization and income level, which are not bad things. But no strategy that only considers career is incomplete because your life is not only about career. Your life has other areas that you may need to look into. So you are building a life, and life contains multiple systems. I've highlighted them there. Life contains multiple systems. It contains your health. it contains your relationships, it contains your financial stability, it contains your mental and emotional energy, it contains your sense of internal peace. That is your life. It's not just a one phase, but it's a mix of many different things. So if your strategy ignores this, something begins to fracture over time. You may not take note of it instantaneously, but over time, something will begin to fracture. And you might build professional success, but at the cost of sustainability. And sustainability is not a luxury. It is a requirement for long-term growth. That is sustainability. And I want us to think long-term for a moment. And by that, I mean in 5 years, do you want a prestigious role but constant exhaustion, or high income but unstable relationships, or visibility but no peace of mind? Or do you want integrated stability? Is that what you really want? So we've seen professionals who have high income earners, they've poured their entire life, sweat, blood into their profession. But you look at their families is in disarray because they took attention to their profession and forgot about their families. The question I want to ask you is, it's okay if your goal is about professional, build it by all means, but it's unsustainable in the long run because you have other areas of your life that you may need to attend to for you to be a balanced human being and live life optimally. So, strategic life planning asks you the following questions: what pace is sustainable for you? Because the pace that is sustainable for you may not necessarily be the pace that's sustainable for someone else. What kind of energy do I want to carry? That's a question you want to ask yourself. What kind of relationships do I want to maintain? What kind of financial stability matters to me? What kind of internal calm do I value? Those are questions that you need to ask yourself. This is where maturity in strategy begins. Because early in your career, ambition is very loud. When you're beginning your career, your ambition is very loud. But later on in your career, alignment becomes louder. And if you're designing a well or a 5 year strategic direction, then it may need to include a professional depth. It includes financial stability. It includes personal growth. It includes emotional steadiness and meaningful relationships. All these work together to make you whole, to make you live a wholesome life. So without alignment, achievement will become very fragile in whichever space or whichever part of your life. But with alignment, achievement becomes sustainable. And you remember, all this is springing up from identity. We began first by laying the foundation of identity. And then now, these are secondary questions that you are answering. How much should I earn? Okay. These now the secondary questions you will be answering that are pegged on your identity as a person. I would like us to transition to the next set of slides. And here we are looking at designing a 5 year direction. And I want you to consider 5 domains. This is designing a 5 year direction. And here is where we translate your identity into structure. And we are becoming more practical even as we continue gearing towards the end of today's session. And you're not just writing a rigid plan when you're looking at designing a 5 year strategic or 5 year direction. We are defining a directional framework that you can use in your life to move from point A to a defined point B. And I want you to think of this as a 5 year snapshot of orientation or 5 year snapshot of direction. 5 year, it might appear too long or is long enough to create meaningful change, but it's short enough to feel concrete. That is 5 year. So we will design this across 5 different domains. The first domain that we'll be looking at is the professional positioning. What kind of professional are you becoming? That's a question that I'd asked before, and you still need to answer. Not what title do I want. It's not about what title do I want. Are you becoming a systems thinker? Are you are you becoming a clinical expert? Are you becoming a policy influencer? Are you becoming a strategist? Are you becoming a builder? Are you becoming a leader? So positioning matters more than titles, because positioning, it will shape the opportunities that come along your way. That is with regard to professional positioning. And those are the questions that I need to ask you to ask yourself. What kind of professional am I becoming? Take some time and answer that question in the course of the week, even before we meet for the next session. The second pillar that I want you to focus on is in terms of your skill depth. And the question under that is, what capabilities are you intentionally strengthening? What capabilities are you intentionally strengthening? Over 5 years, what you intend, I need you to ask yourself over the 5 years, what are you intentionally strengthening over those 5 years? Because depth compounds and breadth without direction diffuses, because breadth is simply stretching yourself thin. You're handling many things at the same time, and so you don't have time to focus on one skill and really become good at it. So it will diffuse your energy, it will diffuse your focus, diffuse your strength. So if you observe your growth over 5 years, like the next 5 years, what pattern would you want to see? If you're to observe your growth over 5 years, what pattern would you want to see? As a question you need to ask yourself, and it will help you to answer the skill depth part. The third pillar I want you to focus on is the financial direction of your life. What level of stability and freedom matters most to you? What level of stability and freedom matters most to you? It is not exactly the numbers, but stability that I want you to focus on. What kind of financial position allows you to operate calmly? You need to put a number to it. What level of security reduces unnecessary pressure? Security, is it about having a home? Is it about having a business or a side hustle that can cover you in case anything happens to your job? That needs to come out clearly. What level of security reduces unnecessary pressure? How much savings do you need to have in your account? Emergency fund do you need to have to cover at least 9 to 12 months or 6 to 12 months of your living expenses in case you don't have any job? So have you put structures in place to enable you to save that? How much do you need to earn in terms of passive income to comfortably say that you're financially free? You can survive without an active job. That is, means your investments are able to give you monthly profits that can cover your living expenses and still have something more to reinvest. Okay, you need to define that really, really clearly. Strategy, when your strategy includes financial clarity, it will help you be proactive in your decisions. Financial instability has a way of driving you to make reactive decisions because you're on survival mode. You don't know where your next rent will come up where you'll get your next rent or the next meal, because you've been fired from your job or your position has been rendered redundant in these economic times, and so you're confused on what to do next. Having a solid 5-year strategic plan along this route will help you, or on financial direction, will help you to cover some of those gaps in your life. Lifestyle design is another one, the fourth pillar. And on this, I want you to ask yourself, what pace and structure are sustainable? What pace and structure are sustainable? That is on lifestyle design. So, what pace are you designing for yourself? Are you building a high intensity trajectory or direction, or a balanced trajectory, or a flexible structure? You cannot separate career direction from lifestyle sustainability. You cannot separate career direction from lifestyle sustainability. And by lifestyle, if you may go deeper to that, it may help you define, where do you want to stay? Which kind of life do you want to stay? Do you want to rent? Do you want to build your house or your home? Which type of car do you want to drive? Do you want to drive, first of all? Do you want to use Uber and Mart? All those questions need to be answered correctly. And at what stage do I need to upgrade my car? After how many years? Is it 5 or 10 years? Or do I want a car really to begin with at this particular point? So those are questions that you need to answer yourself. The fifth pillar is about contribution and impact. And by this, we talk about what kind of problems do you want to help solve? in the society as a general. What kind of problems do you want to solve? What kind of problems do you want to help solve in the society? Because meaning will fuel your long-term, or meaning will fuel your long-term energy. When you have meaning, it will fuel your long-term energy. And without contribution, even achievement will feel hollow, because your achievement is not helping anybody in the society. You're having a lot of money, but you're feeling a lot of emptiness. We've seen people with a lot of money, but they still feel empty. They're still because their money is not tied to any meaning. Why are you chasing that money? Why are you chasing that money? You need to answer that. Will it have any impact or contribution in the society? Contribution doesn't necessarily mean you are helping people who are not your relatives. It could be the contribution and impact you're having. You're looking for the money so that you are able to assist your family have a good quality life. There's meaning tied to it. It's not just money for the sake of it. Okay? So you need to define that. And I want to emphasize something clearly, that this is not about locking yourself into specifics. No, it's not about that. It is about creating a 5-year directional lens that is looking at the 5 pillars. And once this lens exists, then decisions will be simplified. You will make decisions very easily. You will stop asking, is this impressive? And you'll start asking yourself, does this align with my 5-year direction? And that shift will reduce panic in your life. That shift will reduce panic in your life. I want us to shift. I see I have 17 more minutes. On my end, I have about 8 slides. I hope I'll cover that within that time. So I want us to look at a snapshot exercise. Of course, I'll take a screenshot of this and then share in the group, in the WhatsApp group, so that you're able to do that in the course of the week. And there are questions that I need you to ask yourself. Sorry for the overlap. On the slides, I need to re-edit that so that it becomes more clearer. But there are 5 questions that I need you to ask yourself. Where are you working? Like in 5 years' time, ask yourself these questions. Imagine it, and I want you to imagine it is 5 years from today. 5 years plus 2026 is about 2030, 2031. So imagine it is 5 years from today. Imagine I want you to pause and then visualize your life in detail. Visualize your life in detail. And this imagination will have to be anchored in identity. And I want you to mentally step 5 years forward from today, that is 2030, 2031, and get rid of anxiety or even competitively. Do not look at it anxiously or competitively. I want you to look at it calmly. So it is 5 years from today, and you wake up in whichever place you are living. What does your life look like when you look at your life? Not just your job, your life as a whole. Not just your job, but your life as a whole. Where are you working at that particular point 5 years from today? What kind of environment surrounds you? Are you operating locally, nationally, internationally? Are you in clinical depth, policy influence, leadership, innovation, or whichever field? Which field are you in? What skills are you known for 5 years from today? When your name is mentioned in professional circles, what follows it? Is it they are strong in this and this particular skill, or they are known for this and this, or they are reliable in this and this manner? Because reputation is rarely accidental. You have to know that reputation is rarely accidental. It forms from repeated positioning. That's how reputation is formed, from repeated positioning. And what kinds of problem do you solve? That is in 5 years' time. Are you fixing operational inefficiencies? Are you designing systems? Are you leading teams? Are you improving patient outcomes? Are you building strategy? Then widen the lens further. I want you to widen the lens further. What does your daily rhythm feel like? Is it chaotic? Is it structured? Is it flexible? Is it intense? Or is it balanced? As you do that, I want you to notice this, that we are not asking what exact institution you're working in, or what exact salary you're earning, or what exact title you have, because those specifics can shift over time. We are anchoring orientation or direction, and I want you to write it descriptively when you'll be doing that assignment, not rigidly, descriptively. And I want to describe what stability looks like, what alignment feels like, what growth looks like. And this exercise is not about locking yourself into a path, but it is about clarifying your trajectory. I'm sure once you're done with that exercise, you'll have clarity about your trajectory in life, not just about your profession, but generally about things that are of interest or importance to you as an individual. Now, I want us to move to the next slide in the interest of time, where we look at avoiding career anxiety. Avoiding career anxiety, which is something that we really need to do after defining a 5-year direction. Because after you've done that, anxiety may creep in, and you may begin thinking, what if I change my mind after I've written this 5-year strategic plan? What if I change my mind? What if this path closes? What if life disrupts this? Or what if I'm wrong? You may begin asking yourself those questions. And let me say this clearly, that your 5-year direction is not a contract that you're signing with yourself. It's not a binding contract. It is a compass. It's not a contract, but it is a compass. A contract will lock you into whatever agreement that you've gotten into through that contract. But a compass will orient you. When you're losing your direction, a compass will bring you back on the path that you've set to travel. So the purpose of defining direction is not to eliminate flexibility. It is to reduce drift. That is the purpose of direction. And flexibility and direction are not opposites. You remember we looked at direction in one of the sessions that we've covered previously. And so flexibility and direction, they are not opposites. In fact, flexibility without direction, it will create instability. And direction without flexibility, it will create pressure. It's important to take note of that. And so this is the balance that I want you to have. That is having a clear identity about yourself, and a flexible route that you can follow to get you to get you to the destination that you need to get to. So you're not committing to a specific organization. That is not what you are doing when you're writing a 5-year strategic plan. You're not committing to a specific timeline. Neither are you committing to a specific sequence of promotions. You're not doing that. You're committing to becoming a certain kind of professional, and that identity can express itself in multiple ways. For example, it may express itself in terms of, if your identity is, I am becoming a system-oriented healthcare strategist, there are many roles that could express that identity. The route may shift over time, but the orientation will remain intact. That is, I'm becoming a systems-oriented healthcare strategist. So career anxiety often will spring from when you confuse a 5-year orientation with a 5-year guarantee. That's where career anxiety will come in. So 5-year orientation is different from a 5-year guarantee. An orientation won't guarantee you that the outcomes will come as you've planned, but it sort of be a guide to return you on track once you begin drifting. It will tell you, no, this is not in alignment with your priorities. Please get back on track. So that's what an orientation will do. And there are no guarantees when you're having an orientation or a strategic plan, but there can be direction, as I've explained. And direction will reduce internal noise or chaos, and it will allow you to adjust without feeling that you are lost. That is direction. Allow me quickly transition to the next set of slides that we need us to look at, even as we begin winding up. So I want to ask, after you've come up with a 5-year strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan or 5-year thinking will give you structure. But now I want you to widen the lens to a 10-year thinking, which will give you perspective. And perspective will change everything in your life. So when you only think in 1 year or even 3-year window, something subtle will happen. Urgency in your life will begin increasing because you'll be thinking, I don't have time to achieve all this and all that. And every delay will feel significant when you're working with 1 year or 3 years. And every missed opportunity will feel dramatic. Every comparison will feel threatening. But now, when you stretch your horizon to 10 years, something shifts internally. The timeline tends to expand, pressure will tend to soften, and also pace becomes more intentional. That is when you stretch your horizon to 10 years. And so 10-year thinking, it matters because it reduces unnecessary urgencies, because you'll realize you have time to compound and you have time to build depth. You have time to recover from mistakes, and also you have time to refine direction. That is a 10-year thinking. So 10-year thinking also protects sustainability. And if you imagine your life 10 years from now, you naturally ask different sets of questions that are different from what you will ask when you imagine your life 3 years from now. So you begin asking yourself, what kind of health do I want in 10 years' time? What kind of relationships do I want in 10 years' time? What kind of stability do I want in 10 years' time? And what kind of character do I want to embody in 10 years' time? And of course, those questions will reduce impulsive decisions that you're likely to make when you're thinking about 3 years' time. You begin evaluating your choices, not just to speed, but on sustainability, not just on speed, but on sustainability. And so when someone, when you're thinking in terms of 10 years, it will help you to reduce comparison with your peers. And so when someone else moves quickly in a short window or makes a major move in a short window, it won't destabilize you as much because you're playing a longer game and you have a strategy that you're following. That is very, very critical. It will help you minimize comparison. And of course, it's important to note that long games will require depth and not necessarily urgency. Long games require depth and not necessarily urgency. And it's important to be clear that when 10-year thinking is not about predicting exactly where you will be in 10 years. It is about asking yourself, what kind of life do I want to look back on with pride within a decade or 10 years? So it is about asking, what kind of life do I want to look back on with pride in a decade or in 10 years? And that question will change your pace in life. You'll take life more calmly. You'll take life more peaceful, with a lot of peace and a lot of stability when you have a 10-year vision about your life. Quickly, allow me. I'll also share a snapshot or something that you can use in terms of mapping out your 10-year thinking or your 10-year horizontal reflection. Of course, you take some time in the course of next week before our next session to think 10 years ahead. And you're not thinking in terms of titles, not in institutions, not in salary figures. You're thinking in identity and stability. And you ask yourself these questions. In 10 years, what kind of professional am I? What kind of person am I? In 10 years, what kind of reputation have I built? What feels stable in my life in 10 years? What do I feel proud of in 10 years? Those are questions that I want you to ask yourself. I'll also share a screenshot of that in the group so that you, in your own time, you can meditate through that and be able to come with answers that will help you. Now, of course, as a wind up, allow me to skip this slide. That's the calm advantage, of course, which speaks about a long-term direction. When long-term direction is clear, there are things that will begin falling off your life, including comparison. It will tend to reduce. Urgency will soften. You won't be making decisions based on urgency. Decisions will feel lighter because everything will seem aligned. Your life is calm. Focus will strengthen and patience will increase. So at this state, clarity, of course, it's important to know that clarity will not remove uncertainty. It only removes unnecessary noise that could be present in your life. When you don't have clarity, there are a lot of things that will be craving for your attention, a lot of things that will be craving for your energy, a lot of things that will be craving for your time. But when you have clarity, it will remove the uncertainty, it will remove unnecessary noise. And strategy will create that calm that you need, and calm will improve your judgment. There's nothing as beautiful as making correct judgment about decisions, situations, opportunities in life, because you'll always be moving with calculated steps, and that's how you make leaps in terms of growth. That's how you make leaps in terms of growth. I've got 3 minutes to go, and I want us to look at the second last slide of the day, and that is about exercises for next week. I have 2 exercises for you for next week. The first exercise or guided writing that you need to write, get a book, get a notebook that you'll use as a reference material for your 5-year plan. Okay. And I want you to take about 10 minutes in the course of the week when your mind is still very fresh. And I want you to write again. But this time you write differently. And of course, it's not about milestones. You won't be writing about milestones. Uh, it's about maturity. And I want you to ask yourself, uh, I want you to ask yourself the following. Okay? I want you to ask yourself the following. That is for 10 to 15 minutes. And you can pen it in terms of a summary, a 1-page summary of your 5-year direction, not necessarily in bullet points or vague statements, but I want you to write in paragraphs. Describe your future orientation. Describe your future orientation. Begin with 5 years from now, I'm becoming this and this and this and this. Then notice the language that you're using. Is not about, do not use I will definitely be. No, 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 no. But use I am becoming. That is preferred. And that phrasing will keeps it directional and not rigid necessarily. Include 5 dimensions. First, who you are becoming professionally. What kind of thinker, what kind of contributor, what kind of presence. That is with regards to who you are becoming professionally. Secondly, what you want to be known for. And by this, you're talking about the reputation that compounds slowly. Name it now, so that because reputation compounds slowly, name it now. Thirdly, the skills you are deepening. Depth does not happen accidentally. It's important to note that it is built intentionally over time. Fourthly, the kind of stability you are building: financial stability, emotional stability, lifestyle stability, health stability. And fifth and last, the type of impact you want to contribute. May not necessarily be grand or dramatic, but meaningful impact. As you write, I want you to avoid 2 traps. Trap 1 is perfectionism. You are not crafting a public statement to read to anybody. No, you're not doing that. You are building internal orientation. You're writing something for yourself. So avoid the trap of perfectionism. What you write does not necessarily need to be perfect. Trap number 2 is comparison. This is not about what sounds impressive, or it is about what feels aligned with who you are, your identity. If something feels slightly uncomfortable, you need to exploit. That discomfort may reveal the truth that you need to address. And of course, as you do this, I want you to remember you are not locking yourself into a contract, as I mentioned before. You are drafting a compass that will guide you. So that is the first guided assignment I want you to do in the next 7 days before our next session. And then also there's a 10-year writing or the 10-year horizon that I want you to focus also on. And this is now about zooming out from the 5-year. And I want you to write freely that in 10 years, what kind of profession am I? What kind of person am I becoming? What feels stable in my life? What reputation have I built? And what do I feel quietly proud of in 10 years' time? Put yourself in 10 years' time and answer those questions. Think in terms of identity, think in terms of character, and think in terms of uh, sustainability in 10 years' time. Take good time to think through those. Take good time to think through those. And as a parting shot, we've covered, as we close today's session, I want you to pause and recognize what has happened in your life so far. And you've done something that most professionals tend to avoid. You've slowed down long enough, that was in week one, to define orientation. You now have a 5-year directional framework after you've concluded the assignment, the writing that I've told you to do. You have a 10-year identity perspective, and you have a clearer understanding of who you are becoming. Of course, nothing externally may have changed yet in your life, but identity, structure has now formed or taken shape, and structure will change how you decide or how you make decisions. And I want us to bring this together. That direction reduces drift, as we looked at in one of the sessions. And without direction, your energies will be scattered everywhere. And with direction, energy will be concentrated or will be focused. And so having perspective will reduce panic in your life. So when you think in 10-year horizon, urgency will soften and you stop reacting to noise, you begin building in depth. So that is basically what we've been able to cover for week one. And I would like us to bring the session to a close at that particular point. I want us to bring the session to a close at that particular point. And remember, in week one, we built on awareness. In week two, we built on intention. And week three, we are building on strategy. So next week, that is week 4. Remember, it's an 8-week program. We are heading to week 4, and we'll be moving from direction to structure. We'll be moving to translate trajectory into realistic goal setting. So we are building line upon line. So it will be structured execution. That is what we'll be focusing on next week. And I'm looking forward to having you join that particular session. Please purpose to always be present whenever you can. If you can't, whenever we're done with the session and you have an opportunity to catch up with the recording, please do so that your building is not disjointed, but you are building line upon line. I would like to bring the session to a close at that particular point. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them. Yes, Karen, I see your hand is up. Please ask your question.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Doc, for the session. It was very insightful. It actually got me thinking a lot about my life. So my question was, you're into sales and marketing. That's one area I'm interested in. But currently, in RA and I'm learning about pharmacovigilance also. So when you're talking about clarity and strategy and, not just rushing into any opportunity you get, I still want to ask from a perspective, do you think it's still the right direction for me who wants to eventually get into sales to start out in regulatory affairs and pharmacovigilance? Because that's what is available right now for me as a pre-intern with no license. Because I tried looking for med repping roles, I didn't get, but I got PV and array. So am I still in the right direction? Am I tunaenda na flow? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. My response to that has always been there's a reality that we live in, and there's a passion and direction that you want to follow. So the reality could be that, and I always like to be as practical as it can get, or as practical as I can be. If I was to tell you that 5 years or 3 years down the line or before, I had my direction in terms of career clearly outlined, I will be lying. Marketing and sales wasn't part of what I had intended to do. My dream has always been to find myself in a place where policy are being formulated, especially with regards to healthcare, and advocacy is happening. That has always been my dream. But now the reality was, or still is, I have bills to pay. I have many things that may demand my presence financially. So what are the trade-offs that I'm willing to make now, even as I steward my ship towards my desired destination of policy in healthcare space? Now, several things. I'm enrolled in Masters in Public Health. Public health, I know it will equip me with the skills and the knowledge I need in terms of policy formulation, even advocacy. At the moment as it is, I'm also volunteering or serving in Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, and I've served in different capacities, especially in advocacy, government affairs, and policy formulation. So that is also equipping my skills in that angle. I may not necessarily be earning from my passion in terms of policy, advocacy, and government affairs, but I'm building my knowledge around that space. In the meantime, I picked roles that I may not necessarily have a long-term perspective in terms of doing it in a lifetime, but I'm still passionate about and I'm skilled in, which is able to give me value in terms of finances to offset my bills and all that, which is still a very good space. I'll practice marketing for the rest of my life. I'll practice sales for the rest of my life, although in different shapes and forms. It keeps on evolving, especially in the pharmaceutical space. So is a skill set that also I'm adding in my quiver. The practical approach will be in your state that you are in currently as a pre-intern, what is available? Maybe is RA, regulatory affairs and all that. Maybe you need some money to be able for upkeep. That's one angle to look at it. So you are forced to take what is available. But if you had your base covered, your upkeep covered and all that, I wouldn't see harm to go and volunteer if there is no paying opportunity, because your end game as at now is to begin orienting yourself towards a certain direction. Or you volunteer yourself to learn about sales, medical repping. You may not get much, but what you're getting in terms of knowledge will give you leverage in terms of earning more in future. That is another angle you could take. And maybe after internship, you've saved enough. Now, when you talk about direction, already you've experienced the market and you know how it behaves. When you're going for internship, your purpose should be, let me save as much as I can, amount that can take me, let's say, for an year post-internship, even if I don't work for an year. And that year post-internship, instead of going to look for locum opportunities in community pharmacy, I can comfortably dedicate 6 months immediately after internship, either to work as a med rep, because med repping may not be paid much. Entry level salary is not much compared to what you'll be paid during internship. And take that money, but at the same time, someone has opened a door for you to learn about sales and marketing. Or if you don't get an opportunity where you are being paid as an entry level, you can volunteer as an intern in medical sales and marketing and sales, and learn for 6 months, dedicated to learn. When you have it in your CV, it becomes easier to get any other role that comes through that line as a pharmacist in marketing and sales. So those are the options that maybe I'll see as practical in the current reality that we live in. I don't know if that is a good attempt in addressing your question, Karen.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Do you have any